Betrayal slices deepest when it comes from your own flesh and blood. I flew halfway across the country to welcome my first grandson, only to have my own son slam the hospital door in my face. They thought I was just a naive, middle-aged mother-in-law they could easily push aside to steal $20 million. They picked the wrong woman. Beneath this gentle, grandmotherly exterior, I am the absolute worst nightmare they never saw coming. Hello and welcome back to the wonderful audience of James Revenge Stories. Sadly, YouTube has completely disabled our channel's monetization, leaving us without a budget to operate and pay our hardworking staff. If you enjoy today's story, please consider supporting us with just $1 by scanning the PayPal QR code on your screen or clicking the link in the description or comments so our team can sustain their livelihoods and keep bringing you these thrilling tales. My name is Allison Ferguson. I am 46 years old, and my professional life is buried deep in the cold, calculated shadows of digital forensics as a senior cybersecurity analyst. I track digital ghosts and dismantle complex threats for a living. Yet, on this particular afternoon, all my tactical training vanished. I was just an anxious mother, overflowing with pure, blinding joy. The moment I received the frantic message that my daughter-in-law, Chloe, had broken her water, I abandoned everything. I booked the very first emergency flight out of Seattle, my heart hammering a chaotic rhythm the entire journey down to an incredibly affluent, highly gated community in Austin, Texas. Chloe had practically begged me to come. Her text messages from just a few hours prior were saturated with sweet words, heart emojis, and desperate pleas. "Please hurry, Mom," she had typed. "I need you here with me right now." I practically ran through the pristine, overly sanitized corridors of the VIP maternity ward, clutching a ridiculously oversized plush bear I had grabbed at the airport. When I finally reached the grand, soundproof double doors of her private suite, I braced myself for tears of overwhelming happiness. Instead, the door cracked open, and my son, Tyler, stepped out into the hallway. He did not reach out to hug me. His body language was completely rigid, his shoulders hitched up to his ears in an unnatural posture. He blocked the entryway entirely, his eyes shifting nervously left and right as if checking the ceiling for surveillance cameras. "Mom, go home," he said. His voice dripped with a cold, hollow detachment that felt like a physical punch to my gut. "Chloe wants an absolutely private birth. You being here will only make her panic more." I stood there on the sterile linoleum floor, completely paralyzed. "Panic?" I whispered, my voice shaking uncontrollably. "Tyler, she just texted me. She used the sweetest words to beg me to get on that plane. You need to leave right now," he snapped, completely ignoring my logic. He refused to even meet my gaze. His knuckles turned stark white as he gripped the heavy brass doorknob. Without another word, he stepped back inside and slammed the heavy oak door directly in my face. The sharp, metallic click of the lock echoed down the empty, silent hallway, sealing my humiliation. The rejection burned through my veins like acid as I walked out of that hospital entirely alone. I found myself stranded in a stiff, unfamiliar hotel room, staring blankly at the ugly patterned carpet. The silence of the room felt incredibly heavy and suffocating. I pressed my hands to my face, fighting desperately to hold back the tears, trying to process the agonizing cruelty from the boy I had raised with so much love and sacrifice. But as the initial wave of grief began to slowly recede, the analytical side of my brain began to wake up. It was the part of me that spent decades hunting down logical fallacies and hidden anomalies. Something was fundamentally, horribly wrong. The glaring discrepancy between Chloe's sweet, urgent text messages and Tyler's hostile barricade made absolutely zero logical sense. I began replaying the last 2 years of their marriage in my mind, sifting through the memories like raw data. Chloe had always been impeccably perfect. Too perfect. Over the past 2 years, she had systematically isolated Tyler from his old friends. She managed all their devices and accounts under the guise of taking the burden off his shoulders. A creeping, chilling premonition started crawling up my spine, freezing the blood in my veins. My son was not just acting stressed. He was acting terrified. The sun rose the next morning, offering absolutely no comfort. I decided to swallow my pride and go back to the hospital, hoping the tension had passed and I could at least catch one glimpse of my newborn grandson. When I arrived at the VIP reception desk, the head nurse gave me a deeply confused look. "Oh, Mr. and Mrs. Ferguson?" the nurse said, double-checking her illuminated monitor. "They checked out at midnight. They took baby Leo and left without leaving a single message." Midnight. Who checks a fragile newborn out of a hospital in the middle of the night? They had vanished into thin air. There was no text message. There was no missed call. It was a ghostly, orchestrated departure that screamed of evasion. I returned to my hotel room, the sharp physical pain in my chest making it genuinely hard to breathe. I was completely broken. I pulled my suitcase onto the bed, ready to pack my bags and fly back to Seattle in absolute agony, surrendering to the bitter reality that my own family had discarded me. Just as I folded my last sweater, the heavy silence of the room was violently shattered. My highly encrypted government-issued secure phone began to vibrate erratically against the glass nightstand. I paused, my brow furrowing in instant suspicion. I picked the heavy device up. A bright, glaring red alert was flashing relentlessly across the dark screen. The notification on my encrypted device was a Level 1 secure alert from my primary financial institution. I tapped the screen, and the text materialized in stark, unforgiving white letters against a black background. A loan for exactly $300,000 had been successfully mortgaged against my primary residence. The digital ink on the electronic signature was barely dry. I stared at the timestamp of the final authentication protocol. It was executed exactly when I was 30,000 feet in the air somewhere over the Midwest, entirely cut off from any cellular or wireless networks. I was physically incapable of signing anything. In a fraction of a second, the heartbroken mother vanished completely. The agonizing sorrow in my chest evaporated, instantly replaced by the ice-cold, methodical precision of a senior operative for the Bureau of Digital Asset Security. I wiped the remaining tears from my face. I walked over to my suitcase, bypassed my clothes, and pulled out my heavy, ruggedized field laptop. I set the machine on the hotel desk and initiated the biometric boot sequence. As the dark screen flickered to life, my fingers hovered over the keyboard. This was my domain. Out in the real world, I might be an aging woman who could be pushed around and locked out of a hospital room. But in the digital realm, I am a predator. I launched a secure tunnel directly into the Bureau's private servers, accessing a suite of military-grade packet sniffers and forensic tracing algorithms. I needed to find out exactly where that digital signature originated. The money had already been moved into a holding account, masked by layers of dummy corporations. But I did not care about the destination yet. I only cared about the origin point. Every digital action leaves a footprint, no matter how hard you try to scrub it. I pulled the raw transaction data from the bank's server and began peeling back the layers of encrypted routing. The attacker was incredibly skilled. They had bounced the signal through proxy servers in 4 different countries to wash the IP address. But they made a microscopic error in the final handshake protocol. My tracing software latched onto that tiny vulnerability and yanked the real IP address out of the darkness. The screen blinked, displaying the true origin coordinates. I froze. The signal had not come from a remote hacker in Eastern Europe. The network signal had been routed directly through the private Wi-Fi network of the VIP maternity ward at the Austin Medical Center. I rapidly cross-referenced the precise minute the $300,000 was authorized. It happened exactly during the 45-minute window when Tyler had been shoved out into the hallway under the false pretense of doctors needing space for a medical intervention. While my son was pacing the corridor in a blind panic about his wife and child, his supposedly incapacitated wife was lying in her hospital bed, executing a massive wire fraud scheme against his mother. But how did she bypass the bank's multi-factor authentication? The bank required a secondary verification ping from my personal device to authorize a loan of that magnitude. I leaned back in the cheap hotel chair, staring at the glowing data strings as the horrifying truth locked into place. The text messages, those sweet, desperate messages begging me to fly down immediately, were never about needing maternal support. They were bait. Chloe needed my physical device to be within a specific geographical radius. By tracking my flight, she knew the exact moment I landed at the Austin airport. As soon as my phone reconnected to the local cell towers, her malicious script hijacked my geolocation data to satisfy the proximity requirement of the bank's security protocol. She weaponized my love for my family to steal my identity. The entire morning suddenly made terrifying sense. Being coldly banished from the hospital was not an impulsive, emotional decision made by a stressed woman in labor. It was a highly orchestrated, flawlessly executed theater production, scheduled down to the absolute minute. Chloe needed me in the city to satisfy the digital security perimeter, but she needed me locked away in a hotel room so I could not physically intervene or check my secure devices while she finalized the transaction. Furthermore, by framing the theft right in the middle of a chaotic childbirth, she had crafted the ultimate airtight alibi. No jury in the world would ever believe a woman actively giving birth was simultaneously orchestrating a high-level cyber heist. My hand instinctively reached for my secure phone to dial the federal authorities. I could have a strike team at their house in 20 minutes, but my hand stopped hovering over the screen. I pulled my hand back. Calling the police right now would be a catastrophic mistake. The local authorities would never understand the immense complexity of this cyber warfare. They would see a crying, postpartum mother holding a newborn and dismiss my claims as the paranoid delusions of a bitter, rejected mother-in-law. Chloe was operating from the shadows, hidden behind a carefully constructed mask of absolute innocence. If I tipped my hand now, she would erase the remaining evidence and vanish into the wind with my money, taking my son and my grandson down with her. I closed my eyes and took a deep, steadying breath. I did not just want to stop her. I needed to completely destroy the false reality she had built around my son. I needed to drag her out of the dark and expose the monster hiding behind that beautiful face. I bypassed standard protocols and routed my connection directly into the deepest, most restricted archives of the Bureau of Digital Asset Security. This was our underground data pool, a highly classified repository that compiled global intelligence, facial geometry, and behavioral tracking from thousands of international law enforcement agencies. I opened my personal secure cloud drive and downloaded every single photograph I possessed of my daughter-in-law. I gathered candid shots from Thanksgiving dinners, posed wedding portraits, casual weekend barbecues, and holiday gatherings. I fed all 82 images into the Bureau's Apex facial recognition engine and initiated a deep-dive behavioral analysis algorithm. The screen immediately shifted into a chaotic, rapid-fire blur of biometric grids. The software was aggressively mapping the exact millimeter distance between her pupils, the unique structural curvature of her cheekbones, and the specific asymmetry of her jawline. Human beings can dye their hair, alter their accents, and forge government passports with relative ease, but underlying bone structure and micro-expressions are entirely immutable. I sat in the absolute silence of the hotel room, watching the loading bar inch across the monitor. My jaw clenched so tight my teeth ached. The system finally pinged. The results flooded my screen, and the ambient temperature in the room seemed to plummet straight to freezing. The woman my son knew as Chloe did not exist prior to the year 2021. According to the entire interconnected global database, she had no official birth certificate, no high school academic records, no childhood medical history, and no tax filings before that specific year. The entire identity of the sweet, caring, slightly naive girl from Oregon was nothing more than a freshly minted synthetic persona. She was a corporate phantom, a ghost engineered to infiltrate and destroy. The algorithm continued to churn, pulling up 3 separate biometric matches from international red notices. In the year 2018, she was operating under a completely different name in Vienna. heavily linked to a massive corporate espionage case involving stolen aerospace schematics. In the year 2019, she surfaced in Buenos Aires, leaving behind a devastating trail of shattered technology executives and entirely drained corporate treasury accounts. Now, she had deliberately woven her toxic threads right into the heart of my family. My mind raced, violently connecting the terrifying dots. If she was a highly trained international operative, the $300,000 she stole from my home equity was practically pocket change. It was a complete insult to her advanced skill level. Why would a seasoned professional burn a perfectly crafted, multi-year undercover identity for such a relatively small payout? I stared at the transaction logs from the bank again, and the sickening truth hit me like a physical blow to the chest. The mortgage theft was never the actual goal. It was merely a penetration test. She was testing her ability to frame me. She was making absolutely sure her synthetic alibi held up against federal banking security protocols before executing the main event. The real target was Tyler. Or rather, the real target was my son's life work. Tyler had spent the last 4 grueling years building a revolutionary logistics software company from the absolute ground up. Just 3 weeks ago, his startup had triumphantly closed a massive Series A funding round. The venture capital investors had successfully wired exactly $20 million into the company's central holding account. That was the ultimate prize. That explained perfectly why this international predator had spent 2 entire years playing the devoted, loving wife, systematically isolating my son from his sharpest peers, and demanding total administrative control over their domestic internet networks. The sheer scale of her framing plot was utterly breathtaking. She was not just going to steal the $20 million. She was going to execute a highly complex routing maneuver, siphoning the entire venture capital fund into a labyrinth of untraceable offshore cryptocurrency wallets through a process called tumbling. When the investors inevitably realized the money was completely gone, the digital forensics would point squarely and undeniably at the chief executive officer. Tyler would face decades in a federal penitentiary for massive corporate wire fraud. But Chloe needed a designated scapegoat to ensure she slipped away cleanly without any federal agents hunting her down. By establishing a prior, undeniable digital trail of me supposedly stealing $300,000, she was meticulously building a false narrative for the authorities. The fabricated story would claim that the greedy, manipulative cybersecurity expert mother was the true mastermind behind the entire corporate theft, using her advanced skills to force her son into compliance. Chloe would simply play the role of the innocent, devastated wife left holding the baby, walking away with a fortune while my son and I rotted in prison. The calculated malice of her plan triggered a cold, absolute rage deep within my core. I reached for my secure line and punched in a classified 10-digit numerical sequence. The call routed directly to my elite digital task force back at headquarters. "Ferguson," my second-in-command answered immediately. "I have a 0-day situation," I commanded, my voice completely devoid of any human emotion. "I need you to spin up a darknet surveillance grid right now. Protocol Shadow Weave. I am sending you the target IP address on the secure channel." "Understood. What is the operational scope of the net?" "Absolutely everything," I replied sharply. "I want total domain dominance over that residential address. Tap the wireless routers, the smart thermostats, the security cameras, the kitchen appliances, the baby monitors. If a single byte of data enters or exits that house, I want it perfectly cloned and routed directly to my terminal in real time. But you must keep the digital footprint completely invisible. The target is highly sophisticated. If she detects even a microsecond of latency on her network, she will scrub the hard drives and disappear before we can lock her down." Within 45 minutes, my elite team had successfully deployed the Ghost protocol. I sat in the darkness of my hotel room, watching my terminal illuminate as we silently breached the digital perimeter of my son's house. I was now looking directly through the eyes of every single smart device in their home. The predator firmly believed she was safely operating in the shadows, perfectly positioned to destroy everything I loved. She had absolutely no idea that she had just stepped straight into an inescapable cage built by the very woman she intended to destroy. I had to swallow the bitterest pill of my entire life. Sitting alone in my home office back in Seattle, I picked up my phone and dialed my son's number, forcing my voice into the shaky, contrite register of an overbearing mother who had finally realized the error of her ways. Every single syllable tasted like ash in my mouth. When Tyler answered, I immediately launched into a heavily rehearsed, pathetic apology. "Tyler, sweetheart, I am so incredibly sorry," I pleaded, ensuring my voice trembled just enough to sound authentic. "I was just so overwhelmed with excitement about the baby that I completely overstepped your boundaries. I let my emotions get the better of me. Please forgive me." I could hear the faint rustle of the phone changing hands. Then, Chloe's voice drifted through the speaker, dripping with a sickening, manufactured sweetness that made my stomach churn. "Oh, Mom, do not worry about it at all," she cooed effortlessly. "We were just so stressed with the delivery. We would absolutely love for you to come back and see little Leo properly whenever you are ready." I smiled to an empty room, though it felt like a razor blade pressing against my lips. As a peace offering, I told them I was sending a top-of-the-line smart baby monitor via overnight courier. It arrived at their doorstep the very next morning. To the untrained eye, it looked exactly like a premium consumer product, complete with high-definition night vision, a sleek white casing, and soothing digital lullaby features. In reality, it was a Class 4 network interceptor manufactured exclusively by the hardware division at the Bureau of Digital Asset Security. It utilized a passive signal absorption mesh. The moment Tyler plugged that innocent-looking camera into the nursery wall, my trap slammed shut. The baby monitor did not just broadcast crying sounds to their cell phones. It acted as an invisible, silent vacuum, absorbing every single packet of data transmitted over their local network. Back at my terminal, the dark screen exploded with streams of intercepted traffic. I finally had direct, unfiltered access to Chloe's secret world. It took my agency's brute force decryption algorithms exactly 3 hours to crack her custom cipher. What I uncovered was genuinely terrifying. She was actively messaging a handler from a massive transnational crime syndicate operating out of the Mediterranean basin. I sat in the cold glow of my monitors, watching the text scroll across my screen in real time as she detailed the final stages of her operation. She confidently confirmed to her handler that my son's $20 million venture capital fund was ripe for the taking. She also confirmed that her designated fall guy, meaning me, was perfectly framed with the fake $300,000 mortgage theft. She requested 1 more week to let the initial bank transfers clear before initiating the final sweep. I did not have a week. I had to force her hand immediately by exploiting the one fatal flaw every successful criminal shares: undeniable greed. 2 days later, I was back on a commercial flight to Austin, playing the role of the doting, oblivious grandmother to absolute perfection. Walking into their modern, sunlit home felt like stepping directly into a serpent's den. Tyler met me at the door with a hesitant, tired hug, while Chloe gracefully handed over my precious grandson. Holding baby Leo for the very first time was a profoundly grounding moment. His tiny, warm fingers curled tightly around my thumb, and as I looked down at his innocent face, I silently promised him that I would burn the entire world to the ground to keep him safe. But the moment Chloe turned her back to fetch me a glass of iced tea, the seasoned operative in me went straight back to work. I sat at their expansive marble kitchen island, loudly complaining about how exhausted I was from my government job. I pulled my agency-issued tablet from my tote bag and placed it right on the counter, leaving the screen glowing brightly. I had spent hours carefully fabricating an official-looking dashboard, complete with fake Department of Defense seals. It displayed a highly classified, multi-million-dollar federal digital treasury that I was supposedly auditing for the week. "These new security protocols are just driving me completely crazy," I sighed heavily, rubbing my temples like a confused, aging woman who was completely out of her depth with modern technology. "They want me to manage a backup fund worth $35 million. but I cannot even remember the 16-digit encryption key they assigned me this morning. My memory is just not what it used to be. Chloe paused by the refrigerator, her posture stiffening just a fraction of an inch. She was listening intently. I took a bright yellow sticky note from my purse, grabbed a ballpoint pen, and slowly wrote down a complex string of alphanumeric characters. I purposely muttered the fake password under my breath as I wrote, making sure she could hear the exact cadence of the letters and numbers. I stuck the bright yellow square directly onto the bezel of my tablet, took a sip of my iced tea, and slowly left the room to rock my grandson to sleep in the living room. I left the tablet and the sticky note sitting completely unguarded in the kitchen for exactly 2 hours. That night, I retreated to the guest bedroom across the hall. The large house grew incredibly silent. I pulled up the thermal feed from the nursery interceptor on my secure phone. At exactly 2 o'clock in the morning, a bright red heat signature glided silently down the dark hallway and entered the kitchen. The hidden lens captured Chloe in stunning high definition. She did not turn on the overhead lights. She moved with the silent, predatory grace of a highly trained operative. She approached the kitchen island, her eyes locked onto my glowing tablet. A chilling, triumphant smirk spread across her face in the pale moonlight. She pulled out a small, encrypted burner phone and carefully photographed the yellow sticky note. She truly believed she had just hit the ultimate jackpot. In her arrogant mind, she was about to steal $20 million from my son, frame me for a massive federal banking crime, and casually loot an extra $35 million from the United States government on her way out the door. She thought I was nothing but a stupid, trusting old woman ripe for the slaughter. She swallowed the bait whole, completely unaware that the password she just copied was actually a digital guillotine waiting to drop. The fateful Friday morning finally broke, bringing with it a thick, suffocating Texas humidity. Tyler kissed his wife goodbye and drove off to his corporate office, completely unaware that his entire life was dangling over a terrifying precipice. I had also vacated the guest room early under the convenient excuse of needing to pick up specialty baby formula from a pharmacy across town. However, my actual destination was much closer. Exactly 3 blocks away from their pristine suburban driveway, I stepped into the heavily armored rear compartment of an unmarked tactical communications van. The interior was bathed in the harsh blue glow of floor-to-ceiling server racks and a massive array of high-definition monitors. My elite digital strike team sat ready at their consoles, their hands hovering over keyboards, waiting for my final command. I strapped myself into the leather command chair and locked my eyes onto the primary central monitor. The live video feed from the nursery interceptor streamed flawlessly, painting a crystal-clear picture of the predator moving through the empty house. Chloe wasted absolutely no time. The moment she confirmed Tyler's vehicle had exited the neighborhood gates, she dropped the loving mother facade entirely. She marched directly into Tyler's private home office, locked the heavy oak door behind her, and booted up her concealed, heavily modified hacking rig. From my command console, I possessed a direct, unobstructed view of her digital desktop. The tension inside the tactical van spiked so sharply the air felt practically electric. I watched her perfectly manicured fingers fly across the mechanical keyboard with terrifying, practiced speed. She split her dual monitors. On the left screen, she established the illegal bridge into Tyler's corporate holding accounts, preparing to drain the $20 million. On the right screen, her ultimate display of hubris, she brought up the heavily fortified login portal for my fabricated government treasury. "She is initiating the dual breach sequence now," my lead technician announced, his voice tight with heavy adrenaline. "Hold your fire," I ordered, my voice dangerously calm. "Let her open the door all the way." I watched in absolute silence as Chloe reached into her pocket, pulled out her encrypted burner phone, and typed in the exact alphanumeric sequence she had stolen from my yellow sticky note 2 nights prior. She was entirely blinded by her own greed, utterly convinced she was about to pull off the greatest heist of her criminal career. She rapidly queued up a complex network of offshore tumbling protocols, intending to scatter the stolen funds across thousands of untraceable cryptocurrency wallets within a matter of seconds. She took one final deep breath. Then, with a triumphant smirk spreading across her face, she slammed her finger down on the execute key. "Now," I commanded. "Drop the hammer." The instant her execute command hit our servers, the entire digital battlefield violently inverted. Instead of downloading millions of dollars, the fake password she inputted acted as a massive, gaping back door. She had essentially invited a hyper-aggressive military-grade hunter-killer malware program directly into the central nervous system of her entire criminal operation. On the live video feed, I watched Chloe's triumphant smirk instantly vanish. Both of her bright monitors violently flickered, then simultaneously slammed into pitch blackness. A massive, glowing, red deadlock symbol violently materialized in the center of her screens, flashing like a digital warning siren. "What is happening?" Chloe screamed at her empty room, furiously mashing the escape keys. She had absolutely no idea the sheer magnitude of the devastation she had just unleashed upon herself. My custom-built malware did not just block her illegal transaction. It actively rode her secure connection backward, ruthlessly tearing through her syndicate's sophisticated firewalls like wet tissue paper. In less than a fraction of a second, the virus identified every single shadow ledger, located every hidden offshore account, and systematically froze the entire global financial infrastructure of her transnational crime syndicate. All of the illicit funds they had stolen and hoarded over the last 10 years were locked away behind impenetrable, government-level encryption walls. I sat back in my command chair and watched the absolute destruction of her empire unfold. Her communication channels were severed, her backup servers were wiped completely clean, her entire digital existence was violently erased from the globe. Inside the office, pure, unadulterated panic finally set in. Chloe realized with horrifying clarity that she was not the predator pulling the strings. She was the prey, and she had just walked straight into a meticulously designed slaughterhouse. She ripped the power cords out of the wall, breathing heavily, her eyes wide with animalistic terror. She abandoned the useless computer and sprinted toward a hidden floor safe underneath the office rug. Her hands shook violently as she spun the combination dial. She threw the heavy steel door open, grabbed a thick stack of forged international passports, a bundle of foreign currency, and a burner phone. She shoved the escape materials into a black leather duffel bag, her chest heaving with frantic, desperate breaths. The calculated, ice-cold operative was completely gone, replaced by a terrified fugitive who knew her time had just run out. She slung the heavy bag over her shoulder and sprinted out of the office, making a desperate final dash toward the garage to escape before the authorities arrived. She thought she could still run. She had absolutely no idea the real nightmare was waiting right outside her door. Chloe burst through the heavy fire door leading into the attached garage, her boots slapping frantically against the smooth concrete floor. She slammed her palm against the electronic wall switch to open the main bay door. The heavy mechanical gears groaned, and the large aluminum panels began to slowly rise, letting in a sliver of blinding midday Texas sunlight. She clutched her black leather duffel bag tightly against her chest, ready to sprint to her getaway vehicle. But as the door cleared her eye level, she froze entirely in her tracks. She was not staring at an empty driveway. She was staring directly at a solid wall of black tactical armor. A heavily armed joint federal task force had completely surrounded the entire perimeter of the house. Red laser sights danced across her chest and forehead. And standing dead center, right in the middle of the driveway with my arms casually crossed over my chest, was me. "Put the bag down," I commanded, my voice echoing loudly in the cavernous garage. Chloe was paralyzed, her mouth opening and closing as she tried to comprehend the absolute impossibility of the situation. Before she could even form a coherent sentence, a black sedan screeched to a halt at the edge of the driveway. I had secretly called Tyler's personal cell phone 15 minutes prior, telling him there was an absolute emergency at the house and he needed to come straight home immediately. Tyler threw his car door open and sprinted toward us, his face pale with sheer terror. But he stopped dead in his tracks when he saw the federal agents forcefully grabbing his wife, slamming her against the hood of her own luxury sports utility vehicle, and locking heavy steel handcuffs around her wrists. "What are you doing?" Tyler screamed, his voice cracking with absolute panic. "Mom, what is going on? Tell them to let her go right now." "Tyler, stay back," the lead federal agent ordered, holding up a heavily gloved hand. "She is under federal arrest for international cyber espionage, massive wire fraud, and grand larceny." Tyler's knees physically gave out. He collapsed onto the hot concrete of the driveway, his chest heaving as the crushing weight of the unbelievable reality crashed down upon him. He looked at his beautiful wife, the woman he thought he intimately knew, the mother of his newborn child, and saw absolutely zero recognition in her cold, calculating eyes. I slowly walked past my devastated son and stopped right in front of the woman who had arrogant intentions to destroy my entire family. Chloe glared at me with pure, unadulterated venom. The sweet, innocent daughter-in-law mask was entirely shattered, revealing the vicious, cornered predator underneath. I reached into my tailored coat pocket and pulled out a thick, bound paper dossier. It contained every single shred of evidence my elite team had compiled. The fake identities, the stolen aerospace blueprints from Vienna, the drained corporate accounts from Buenos Aires, and the heavily encrypted chat logs with her transnational syndicate handler from just 2 nights ago. I did not say a single word. I simply let the thick stack of papers drop directly from my hand. The heavy dossier hit the concrete floor right at her boots, bursting open and scattering her ugly, undeniable truth all over the pristine garage floor. I watched the last remaining ounce of arrogance completely drain from her face. She knew, in that exact second, that she was utterly and permanently defeated. As the armed agents dragged her away toward the armored transport vehicle, Chloe completely lost her mind. She thrashed violently against her heavy restraints, screaming vicious curses and vile threats that echoed through the quiet, affluent neighborhood. She was going to a maximum security federal prison for the rest of her natural life, without the possibility of parole. Meanwhile, every single cent of the $20 million venture capital fund Tyler had worked so incredibly hard for remained perfectly secure and completely untouched. The chaotic scene eventually cleared, leaving behind a profound, heavy silence. The harsh afternoon sun slowly melted into a beautiful, bleeding Texas sunset, casting long, golden shadows across the empty driveway. I walked over to my son, who was still sitting on the concrete, his face buried deep in his hands, quietly sobbing. I knelt down beside him and pulled him tightly into my arms, resting his head against my shoulder just like I did when he was a little boy. A few minutes later, one of the female tactical medics brought baby Leo out from the house. I gently took my sweet, perfect grandson into my arms. Looking down at his sleeping face, bathed in the soft golden light, a profound sense of peace finally washed over me. I had lost a fake daughter-in-law today, but by utilizing my specialized experience and the necessary ruthlessness required for the job, I had saved my son's entire future and protected the innocent bloodline of my family. It was a harsh, agonizing victory, but it cemented one undeniable truth. Never, under any circumstances, should you ever awaken the sleeping beast that fiercely guards the heart of a mother and a grandmother. Thank you so incredibly much for listening to today's story. We would absolutely love to know where you are tuning in from, so please let us know in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this thrilling journey, please consider supporting our channel with a donation of just $1 by scanning the PayPal QR code currently displayed on your screen, or by clicking the secure PayPal link provided in the description and pinned comment. Your generous contribution directly pays the salaries of our dedicated staff, helping them feed their families and allowing us to continue creating these exciting stories to serve you. Thank you for your amazing support.